Hello, my name is Aviva, and today I wanted to share with you two things. I wanted to go through how my Kindle Unlimited / ebook experience went, because for the past month I had been giving ebooks a shot, and that was something that I've never really tried out before, but Kindle Unlimited had given me a free month because I signed up when I wanted to read that new Mariana Zapata book that came out, that like the day it came out, it only came out in ebook, and I'm like, I am not waiting for this, so I'm going to read it via ebook. So I ended up signing up for Kindle Unlimited way back when, which was basically exactly a month ago, and basically since I already had it, like I already had the month sitting there for free, I'm like, you know what, this is the time for me to try and force myself through ebooks and see if I can get myself into them, because I've never really tried an ebook before. So I basically wanted to share with you how that experience went, basically going from only ever reading physical books into ebooks. But before I get into that, I did want to share with you all of the books that I did spend the month reading via Kindle Unlimited. I want to share with you how they went for me and if I think they are worth the read or not. So the thing about that though is that I write like very detailed reviews for every single book I read, no matter if it's like audiobook or ebook or physical book, whatever it is. I always post my reviews right onto Instagram. Like the second I finish my book, I write my review, it goes up on Instagram. Then right after that, it goes up on GOODREADS. And then right after that, it goes up on TikTok. So if you're following me like literally anywhere else, you might have already seen all of my reviews for these books. So I don't really want to go and repeat myself here. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have links to my GOODREADS reviews for every single book that I'm talking about in today's video down in the description below. So if you wanted to hear more details about any book that I'm talking about today, you could just go and like read the specific book's reviews, like with the link down below sort of thing. So basically what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to be like very simple here and tell you what the book's about, and then tell you if I personally think it is worth your time or not. So that is more or less the gist of what I wanted to do in today's video. So with that said, let's get into it. So the first book that I ended up picking up with my Kindle Unlimited subscription was When Gracie Met the Garnet by Mariana Zapata. This was the whole reason why I actually signed up for the free month. And the thing is that I have talked about this on my channel before, like in another one of my wrap-ups, but I'm gonna do it again because it was the whole reason why this video ended up coming to be. So basically, if you're not familiar, this is a superhero romance. There's this Superman, like Marvel, X-Men sort of guy that ends up falling out of the sky onto this woman's front lawn. She ends up finding him. He's not doing very well. He's very out of it. So she basically like takes him into her house and nurses him back to health. And he is a very, very, very grumpy superhero. And then happens to be, she's somehow involved with the cartel and they're kind of after her. So once he is better, like he's going to end up helping her like with her whole cartel situation. And then obviously somehow it's going to end up being like a very, very slow burn romance. The thing is that I never actually got to the slow burn romance part of it because I ended up DNFing it, I believe 43% in, mostly because it just was not working for me. Mariana Zapata is definitely one of my favorite authors of all time. I have read every single one of her books, and that's why like I went into this one like no questions asked. I'm like, I'm not waiting for it. Like I absolutely love her. I gotta read this book right away. And then unfortunately I didn't end up liking it. I wasn't connecting to the characters. I wasn't really into the whole superhero thing, even though I was trying to give it a shot. I'm like, this is a little bit weird, but like, you know, I'll go into it with an open mind. But unfortunately, it just like was not clicking for me. So I ended up giving up like, you know, halfway through, because it is a really, really thick book, and I just didn't want to waste my time with it because I knew that the slow burn romance was going to end up hitting really hard, but it would only hit really hard if I was into the characters and into the storyline. And because I wasn't, I didn't see a point in it making myself get all the way to the end. So the thing is that would I recommend this book or not? I would say that if you are not a big Mariana Zapata fan, then I would not recommend this book. Like, don't really waste your time with it. She has a lot of other books out there that I'm sure you haven't read yet because you're not a huge fan of her, and I would definitely recommend giving those a shot first. And if you did want to know which ones are my favorite and like, you know, what they're all about and everything like that, I do have like an hour-long video talking about everything you need to know about Mariana Zapata and her backlog. So I will have that video linked down below in case you wanted to look a little deeper into one of my favorite authors of all time. But basically, if you have read every single one of her books and you are a huge Mariana Zapata stan like myself, I would say that yes, it's not worth giving a shot, but I wouldn't go into it with like extremely high expectations. I don't think that this is the best book that she has ever written, but if you end up reading it and connecting to the characters, then yeah, you might have a great time with it. Like, it might not be your favorite of her book, but it still might be worth the read if you are very, very into her writing style. So that was a little bit of like, you know, mixed information, but that's all you're going to get for that one. So next up, I ended up picking up Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. So this is one of those like very hyped up books at the moment. I was seeing it all over my TikTok, all over my Instagram, people just raving about it left and right. So obviously I had to give it a shot. So if you're not familiar with it, it is a college sports romance. You're following this girl who is a figure skater, and then you're following this guy who is the captain of his hockey team. At the beginning of the book, you basically find out that something happened to the hockey team's arena, and it's going to end up being like, out of commission for the foreseeable future. So the college team, like the hockey team, and then the figure skaters, they're going to have to start sharing their space for a little bit. Like they used to have separate spaces so that they can all train on their own schedules, not be in each other's way. And now they're going to have to be in each other's way. So that is kind of how our two main characters ends up meeting, and it's going to obviously end up being their romance. It also does have a very big like found family sort of situation. Like it's a very big friend group that you're following. There's a lot of like hockey kids, and then there's a lot of people that like she brings into the story, like all of her friends and everything like that. And basically it's just going to end up being like, a college experience, and you're going to have like, a romance going on. The thing is that I can't really give you that much more information about the book because I ended up DNFing it halfway through. And honestly, I am surprised that I made it halfway through because I started the book right away and I'm like, this book is just not going to work for me, but like it is so hyped up. So I really should like keep going and keep going. So I literally kept doing that. I was forcing myself through the first 50% of the book. And then I just had to give up because like there was so much about it that I didn't really like. And I did write an entire Goodreads review about it. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but basically I would say that no, this book is not worth the read. I personally think that there are so many better college, hockey, whatever you want to call it, sports romances out there. And this one just did not work for me for a lot of reasons. And I'm honestly not surprised about that because hyped books always end up disappointing me for some reason. Like I always end up like finding some flaw and being like, why the hell is this being hyped up? Like I really do not see what everybody else is seeing in it. So I mean, obviously if you like the book, like I'm very happy that it worked out for you. Not every book is going to be for everybody, and I'm not insulting your taste. If it worked for you and it didn't work for me, doesn't mean that like, one of us is better than the other. I'm just saying that like this one didn't work for me. If you were going to ask my opinion on it, I would say that no, this book is not worth the read. And yes, it is one of those hyped books that is going to end up disappointing you a little bit. So basically that is my take on Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, and I would not recommend giving it a shot. So next up, I ended up reading Meet Me Halfway by Lillian She James, and I ended up giving it a 3 stars. And the thing is that I feel very like mixed about this because I feel like in a different time, if I would have read this like, in a different situation, I might have even given this book like a 4 or 5 stars because I think like by itself, it actually was a pretty solid read. The issue with it that I had though was that I had recently reread Wait for It by Marianne's Pot. I was doing a lot of rereads of Marianne's Pot at the time because I had just finished reading like, When Grace Met the Grump, and I really didn't like it. And I'm like, what? I really wanted a Marianne's Pot sort of read. So I ended up going back and doing a bunch of rereads of my favorite book of hers, and Wait for It was one of the ones that I decided to reread. And then literally a couple of books later, I ended up picking up Meet Me Halfway, and then I ended up seeing so many parallels between the two, and I started feeling a little bit weird about it, like towards Meet Me Halfway. I'm like, this seems a little bit too similar in like my personal opinion. Like I just started seeing like, okay, both of them are single parents and both of them are neighbors. And both of them have these age gaps. And the guys felt very similar. They were both grumpy sunshine situations. And then the details about some of the scenarios, like some of the scenes that happened in the book, literally felt like carbon copies of each other. And because I am such like a Wait for It fan, I was like, okay, well, this book feels like it kind of just like copied it a little bit. And I don't really want to like, put too much on there because I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying that like I read them too close together and they just felt a little bit too similar for like, my personal taste to feel comfortable about reading it. And therefore I ended up bringing my rating a little bit down, mostly because I felt weird about reading it a little bit. But I do think that if you haven't read Wait for It and you were just reading like Meet Me Halfway for what it was, like on the side, just like, because you like that sort of romance, I think that like by itself it is a pretty solid story and it is worth the read. But I personally felt weird about it, and I would say that if you haven't read Wait for It yet, I would read that book over at Meet Me Halfway because I do think that Wait for It was a better version of it, and I also think that it was the original version of it and everything like that. I just think that Wait for It was way better and Meet Me Halfway is just like a copy of it. But if you loved Wait for It and you just want to read another book like that, then literally Meet Me Halfway is exactly that. So take from that what you will. I also ended up reading Triple Duty Bodyguards by Lily Gold, and I ended up giving this book a 2 stars. So the thing is that this is a reverse harem romance. You're following this girl who is a famous actress, and at the beginning of the book, she finds out that she has this stalker and that her life is in danger. So she basically ends up hiring these 3 bodyguards who are like ex-military men, and they're basically going to protect her 24/7, always be around her and everything like that. And it's going to end up being all of their romances. So if you're not familiar, reverse harems is one girl with a minimum of 3 guys. They're all going to be together at the same time, and they're all going to end up together. So it is a very, very smutty romance, like very heavy on the smut, a little bit like less heavy on the actual plot line. And I kind of knew that going into the book, and like that's kind of what I was here for. Like sometimes I'm in that mood, and I have tried a couple of reverse harems in the past, and some of them are worked for me, some of them haven't worked for me as much. I've even read one by Lily Gold in the past. I read like Faking with Benefits, and I really liked that book for what it was. And unfortunately, I did not like this book for a lot of reasons. Wrote about it in my Goodreads reviews, won't go over it again here, but basically no, I would not recommend giving this book a shot. I think that there are a lot of reverse harems out there, even ones that I haven't read yet, and I think that like if you were in that sort of mood, there are better books out there than this one, and I just would not recommend really wasting my time with this book specifically. Next up, I ended up reading Hate Notes by V. Keeland and Penelope Ward. So I actually listened to this via audio as well as reading it via ebook because it was available for free via Audible, and I currently have like a 3-month thing going with them. They had offered me like 3 months for 99 cents a piece, so I ended up like taking it, and I'm in the middle of that at the moment. So I ended up taking the Audible audiobook because it was for free, and then I also had the ebook because like, you know, it was on Kindle Unlimited. So I ended up reading them both together. Like at some points I would just like listen to the audiobook, and then when I had a couple of minutes to sit down and read, I'd jump into the ebook. And I actually really enjoyed the experience of how Audible and Kindle Unlimited like mesh together. They would always like keep my spot in the same thing, so I was always able to easily like jump back and forth between the two of them. So that is a plus sign towards like the Kindle Unlimited audiobook mesh, whatever you want to call it. But either way, besides for that, I thoroughly did enjoy this book. Like it was a very classic workplace environment romance, and there was nothing really wrong with it, but it was also like nothing special that really like stood out to me. It was very enjoyable in the moment sort of read, and I definitely would recommend giving it a shot if it was like on your radar, you're a fan of V. Keeland and Penelope Ward, you like workplace environment romances. Like nothing really wrong with it. A lot of actually like good moments in it, but also it wasn't something that like specifically stuck out to me. So I wouldn't say like, oh my God, this was an amazing book. But if you wanted a quick, easy, nothing special workplace environment romance, this would be a good one to try out. Next, I read Home Game by Odetta Stone. So this is the second book in a sports romance companion series. And honestly, the entire series has been on my radar for a while. Like I have been recommended this series, like all of the books in the series, like from a lot of people. And I've seen good things overall. And I've always like just like had them on my radar, considered purchasing them like here and there, but I never ended up actually like, you know, pressing buy and giving them a shot. And then when I saw them on Kindle Unlimited, I'm like, you know what? Like this is a perfect chance for me to give it a shot without actually like wasting my money on it, because I was very iffy about it. And I ended up reading it, and it's basically about this girl who is homeless, and she ends up running into this professional hockey player, and he's going to end up like feeling really bad for her. So he's kind of like going to take her in and trying to help her get back on her feet. And it's obviously going to end up being their romance. So obviously, like I thought that was a very unique sort of storyline. This professional hockey player like falling in love with a homeless girl, like that was very unique to me. And I really wanted to like it, but unfortunately it did not end up working out for me. And I did DNF it 44% of the way through. And there was a lot about it that I didn't like. I wasn't really liking the girl. I wasn't really liking the writing style. It was feeling very young to me. Like we were following like professional hockey players, so like mid-20s sort of feeling, and it was very like high school feeling to me, like a lot of like petty drama and things along those lines, and it just like was not my vibe. So unfortunately, like I would say that this was not very much worth the read. I said there are a lot of better sports romances out there, and this one just like did not hit the spot for me. Obviously I DNF'd it like less than halfway through, so I didn't think it was very good. So no, I would say that this one was not worth your time, and I would not recommend really reading it. So that is that. Next, I read Marriage for One by Ella Mays, and this is a marriage of convenience, grumpy sunshine sort of situation. And I have seen a lot of really mixed things about this book. I have seen people rave about it, being like, oh my God, this is one of my favorite books of all time. And then equally, I have seen a lot of people also say how they really did not enjoy this book. So I was kind of always like very in the middle of like, do I want to give this book a shot? Do I not want to give this book a shot? Never ended up giving it a shot. But then I saw it on Kindle Unlimited. I'm like, you know what? Perfect timing. Let's read it while it's free. And I actually ended up also getting the audiobook for it, because since I had the ebook for it downloaded, Audible gave me it for a discounted rate. Like I think I only paid like $1.99 for the audiobook because I already own the ebook. And I've noticed that that's actually something that they do sometimes. Like you can just buy the audiobook for like, I don't know, $15+. But if you own the ebook, or if you have the ebook downloaded because it's on Kindle Unlimited, sometimes the audiobook will be much, much cheaper, because you can like, you know, listen to them together. Like you can go from Audible into like, you know, ebook, and then they have that whole tandem thing going on. So they basically sometimes give you like a really good discount for audiobooks. And this is one of those ones where like I had noticed that that was actually a thing. And because I have heard really good things about the audiobook in general, I decided that that is the way that I wanted to do it. So I actually did end up purchasing the audiobook, and I ended up mostly listening to this via audio, but I did end up jumping to the physical book as well. Like not the physical, the ebook of it. I did end up like jumping to the ebook of it like here and there. And I actually really enjoyed that experience of reading it. I did end up giving this a 4 stars, and I honestly was pleasantly surprised by the story. I didn't think that I would enjoy it as much as I did, but I do think that a big reason for that is because I did listen to it majority via audio. I really, really liked the guy's narration, like the guy who was like, talking out his part. I really, really liked him as a narrator. I do think that he really helped me like get through the story. And without him, I'm not sure if I would have enjoyed this book as much as I did, because I do see a lot of what a lot of people say about it, about how there's not much going on and it's a little bit boring and it's just like, it kind of drags at times. But because I was listening to the majority of the book and I was really liking the guy's voice and the way that all that was going down, I really ended up enjoying my experience with it. So I would say that this book was worth the shot, especially if it's something that you were interested in. Maybe it will work for you, maybe it won't, but I will say that if you do want to spend the $1.99 and try the audiobook version of it, then that would be a really good move, because personally, that is how I read it and I really enjoyed it that way. Next, I ended up reading the Bonsat Thai series by Jay Breeze. So this is a collection of 6 books, and the last book is coming out at the end of the month. And I've always been like somewhat intrigued by this series. I've heard really amazing things about it, and I never really wanted to pick it up for 2 reasons. First of all, because it was an unfinished series, and I have heard that all these books end off on really heavy cliffhangers. So I didn't really want to be left hanging, but because the last book was coming out at the end of the month, I'm like, you know what? Finally time, I can get ready for the release and everything like that. And then on top of that, these books are very, very expensive. They're each like a minimum of $20, and I didn't really want to spend all of the money on it if I wasn't sure if I was going to like it or not. And then once I saw that they were available on Kindle Unlimited, I'm like, you know what? Perfect timing to give them a shot. So that is exactly what I did. So if you are not familiar with this story, it is a paranormal reverse harem romance. You're living in this world where there is like these gifted people, and there also happens to be a war. There's like a resistance of gifted people that are kind of fighting against some other gifted people, and there's like a whole thing, like dystopian war aspect thing going on with that. But then the basis of this world is that all these people have these different special gifts, and there's also this bonded thing going on. So you basically have this one center bond, and she is soulmated to a group of people. And at the beginning of this book, you're following this girl who is the center of her bond. There's always like one center, and she is connected to a bunch of people. They're not like all equally connected. It's like there's bonds, and then there is a center bond. And this main girl is the center bond, and basically she has 5 bonded males who are connected to her that all have these like different powers and things like that. And you find out at the beginning of the story that a couple of years ago, she ended up running away from her bonded, which is very unheard of. Like, you guys are soulmated to be together forever. They are like your perfect match, and you are supposed to like always live together in like unity, like in harmony. You're always supposed to live together in harmony and everything like that. Like, you don't run away from your bonded, and she actually ran away from her bonded to protect them, but they never knew that she ran away to protect them. So they kind of all hate her guts and really hate that she ran away from them. So at the beginning of the book, they finally tracked her down after years of looking for her. They bring her back to them, and basically they're going to end up being really mean to her. They're basically going to do like a little bit of like a bully enemies to lover sort of situation. And basically over time, they're obviously going to all find out that she ran away for a reason to protect them and everything like that. And obviously slowly but surely, they're all going to end up falling in love, and you're going to get to see that aspect of the story kind of play out throughout a couple of books. And then at the same time, you also have this whole thing with her powers and the resistance and why she ran away and things like that. And there's a lot of stuff going on, but more or less that is the gist of the story. And honestly, I was very intrigued by that idea, and I really did like the book as I was starting it. As I got into the series, I was enjoying it for what it was, even though I didn't think it was perfect. Book 1, I ended up giving a 3.75 stars, and then book 2 and book 3, I each gave a 4.25 stars out of 5 stars, and then book 4 ended up getting a 3 stars. That's when it really started going downhill. And then the last book that's currently available, the 5th book, I did actually end up DNFing 28% in. So the thing is that I do have a lot of mixed feelings towards this series, and I actually did write very in-depth reviews of what I was enjoying about the book and what wasn't working for me in each and every one of these books. So if you were very interested in reading this series, I definitely recommend looking at all of my reviews for them on Goodreads. But then also I would say that this still might work for you. I am a very picky reader, and I was very, very bothered by a lot of the writing style aspects of this book. I thought that the main girl was very juvenile. There was a lot of petty drama going on. It was a little bit young young for me. I was really hoping it would feel a lot more adultish. Then also like for the actual plot, there was a lot of plot holes. There was a lot of things that I was founding to be missing, and like I wasn't really enjoying the way that it was laid out in general, and that is why I was having a lot of issues with it. But I still will say that it was a very, very, very addictive read. Like I literally like flew through these books super quickly. Like I've never read a series that quick because I just kept wanting to know what was going to happen next, and that mostly was because of the romance. Like I was very into the romance aspect of it. I was very into all of the guys, and I was really enjoying a lot of it. I just wasn't enjoying enough of it to actually end up finishing the last book and wanting to read the last series, like the last book in the series. So I would say to first check out all of my reviews, because I really do think that I'll give you a very clear understanding of what worked for me, what didn't work for me, if it would work for you or not. And then I would say that it's still a 50-50 shot if you should actually give this series a try. I say that if you were extremely intrigued by it, then it would be worth the shot of like, spending your time with it. But if this is something that like was never really on your radar, I would say like don't bother with it, because honestly, I got so aggravated by a lot of stuff that was happening throughout this series that like I almost wish that I didn't really try, but also I'm not really upset that I did, because it was very hyped up and I really did want to know if it was going to be good or not. And if I didn't read it, I would have always been wondering. So if you're in the same situation that I was, I would say try it out. But I honestly, like, I didn't make it through the end. Like I ended up DNFing it 5 books in. So, take from that what you will. So after the Bonsat Thai series, I felt like I really needed a little bit of a palate cleanser. And for some odd reason, I can't even tell you why, I was in the mood of a secret baby trope. I don't know how it hit me, why it hit me, but I was just down to read something like that. And I did have one book on my radar that I knew a lot of people really enjoyed that had this trope in it. So I decided to give it a shot. And that book was Tattered by Devney Perry. So the thing is that I have a very 50-50 sort of thing with Devney Perry. Like I have read some of her books that have really worked for me, but there have also been a lot of books that I absolutely hated, that I've DNF'd, things along those lines of like sometimes her books like I like, sometimes I don't like her books. And basically I was just like, you know what? I've heard good things about this one. I want to read this type of trope. I am just going to go for it. And that is exactly what I did. So if you're not familiar with this book, it is basically about this girl who has a one-night stand with a guy, obviously, and she ends up getting pregnant. And the thing is that she tries to track him down, but they never really exchange any information or anything like that. So she was never able to find him. So she eventually ends up moving out of the city where she had met the guy and moving to a small town to raise her little girl. And now it's years later, and one day this guy is going on a business trip to like look at some development of sorts, and he ends up going to a bar at the end of his meeting or whatever, and he ends up bumping into this girl that he had a one-night stand with years ago. And he had never really forgotten about her, but he was never able to find her. And basically the second that she sees him, she's like, oh my God, I have something I have to tell you. You actually got me pregnant and now you're a father. And basically it's like that sort of situation. And he is going to have to figure out how he can be a father to this little girl that he never knew he had, while still like living his life in the city and doing the things that he was doing. And like also like they're living in this small town. So like how is he going to balance all of it and everything like that? So very classic small town romance sort of situation. Well, not small town romance, well, very classic small town romance situation, but also a very classic secret baby sort of situation. And I will say that it did hit the spot for what I was looking for. Like I was in the mood to read something like this, and therefore it did like hit that spot enough for me. But I don't necessarily like really have any feelings towards this book. I did end up giving it a 2.5 stars because it didn't actually do anything for me. Like there was just something about it that I just didn't per se like connect to anything about it. I was just like there for the ride and just like reading it for what it was, but I wasn't actually like enjoying it whatsoever. So I kind of would say that this book like wasn't particularly worth the read unless you were specifically a Devney Perry fan, you have enjoyed her books in the past, and you were looking for a book exactly like this. So that is all I'll say for that. But anyway, after that, I ended up picking up another reverse romance harem series sort of thing, which was the Madison Case series by Tate James. So it is a collection of 4 books. It's Hate, Liar, Fake, and then Kate. So this is a book that I have seen around a lot and I've heard really good things about, and I've always been somewhat intrigued by it, but for some reason I just like was never really down to actually like commit to a 4-book series that was reverse harem, because I just didn't think like I would absolutely love it. But because it was for free and I had Kindle Unlimited and it was there waiting for me, I decided to just like give it a try while I had the chance. And I don't know if I necessarily regret that decision, but let me first tell you what it's actually about and then we'll get into that. So if you're not familiar, you're basically following this girl girl who at the beginning of the book, she ended up getting in trouble for something that these three guys ended up like setting her up for. Like there was this whole like, riot night on the night of Halloween, and there was a lot of things going down, and she ended up being in like the wrong place at the wrong time. She ended up getting in trouble. It was these guys' fault, and basically now she hates their guts. And now it's 11 months later, and you're gonna find out that it's now going to be like that all three of them and like her are going to have to be living in the same house together and attending college together. Like basically her father is dating like one of these guys' moms, and therefore like they're all living in the same house together because like the other two guys are like best friends with this guy, so they're always around each other, whatever. It's like a whole thing. Does it really matter? Not really. Basically, that's just like the beginning of the setup of the story. So it's very like enemies to lovers, reverse harem sort of romance. And the thing is that you're living in this small town where it's kind of divided by these two rival gangs, and these three guys are a part of one of the gangs, and then like there's another gang that like is making a lot of trouble too. So there's a lot of different dynamics going on, and it has this very like dark and twisted feel to it. It feels very much like the Devil's Night series by Penelope Douglas, like Corrupt and then like Kill Switch, and that whole series, like it kind of gives off those sort of vibes and feelings, but then also mix it a little bit with the Riverdale TV show. Like the Riverdale TV show has all those gangs going on, and it's got just like that atmosphere to it. So I feel like this series was very much a big mix of both of those. So if that was something up your alley, I'd say that like, this series might be very much up your alley. It is a reverse harem, so there's three guys who are going to end up getting with one girl, and basically I liked a lot of it. I ended up making it 3 books into this series. So I ended up giving the first book, Hate, a 3.5 stars. I ended up giving the second book a 3.75 stars, and then I ended up giving the third book a 3.5 stars. And that was mostly because I found it to be very addictive. The thing is that not much really happened in the story, because about halfway through of the first book of the series, you end up finding out that this girl has a stalker, and then the rest of the series is basically finding out who is stalking her and who is trying to kill her. And these guys are eventually going to become very protective of her, turn into her bodyguards, and it's kind of like that sort of vibe. The thing is that I feel like the actual like plot line of the book was very much like dragged out, and I wasn't really liking that aspect of it. And I was enjoying the whole like reverse harem situation. Like I was liking all of the guys, and like, she was there, but like I wasn't really liking her. But either way, like there was enough about it that actually kind of somehow got me through 3 books. But at the end of the day, it's like I kind of like finished the third book, and I'm just like, I'm not really enjoying this. Like the reverse harem aspect is not my favorite reverse harem aspect that I've ever read. Like there was a lot of jealousy going around between the 3 guys. Like none of them really wanted to share her, but she really wanted the reverse harem thing to happen. So basically they were just wanted to do it to make her happy. And that's not the type of like reverse harem that I really enjoy reading about. So even though I was enjoying it for what it was, I just like wasn't absolutely obsessed with it. And then at the end of the day, like the plot line of it, like the whole dragged out thing of the stalker situation, I wasn't loving either. So I just decided that like I didn't really care to read the last book. So what I did instead was I Googled for a bunch of spoilers, and I kind of read everything that I needed to know about the last book. And I don't really regret that decision. Like I kind of read and I found out what I needed to know, and I don't really I'm happy that I didn't waste my time reading the last book, if that makes sense. So either way, would I recommend this series or not? I would say that yes, I would recommend it if it sounds like it's something that you would enjoy. Like I would recommend reading all of my reviews and hearing all of the positive and negative things that I had to say about it. And if what I said, it doesn't seem like something that would actually bother you, then I would say 100% go for this, because I do think that this is a series that a lot of people could enjoy, and I know that a lot of people have enjoyed it, but personally it just wasn't super much up my alley, so therefore it didn't work for me. But I'm honestly not upset that I read the first 3 books. Like I enjoy them for what they were. They weren't my favorite, but they were there and I read them, and it is what it is. So yeah, that is kind of my thoughts on that series. So the last book that I'm going to be sharing with you today, which is the last book that I actually read when I had my free month of Kindle Unlimited, is Heartless by Elsie Silver. So this is the second book in the Chestnut Springs companion series, and I've actually read every single book by Elsie Silver. I had found her a little while ago while she only had her like first series that was out there, like the GOODREADS Ranch companion series, and she recently started making like this new series, and I had read the first book and it was okay. It wasn't my favorite. And then now that I saw this one had just come out, I'm like, I have to read this before my Kindle Unlimited subscription is over, because it had just come out over the weekend. I had like a day and a half left of my, free month. So I'm like, this is the last book that I wanted to read. So I ended up reading it, and I ended up giving it a total of 3.75 stars. And honestly, I feel like I'm a little bit lowballing it, but I wanted to be very particular with what I give this book, because I do feel like this is a book that people are going to start to see around a lot, because it only just came out and I feel like a lot of people are going to absolutely love it. I've already been seeing a lot of people like rave about it here and there, but obviously that's just like opening weekend reviews coming out. But either way, I want to be very particular with what I review this as, mostly because I feel like there's going to be a lot of mixed things going on about it. So I actually started this book and I absolutely was loving it. I was so into it right away. So you've got like this single dad who ends up hiring a nanny. It's obviously going to end up being their romance. There's an age gap going on. There's a forced proximity thing going on because they're both living in the same house because she's always having to watch the guy. So like the little kid. So she's basically like living in their house for the summer. And there's a lot of other things going on. Did I not say Grumpy Sunshine yet? Like there's a guy falls first situation and there's a lot of tension, a lot of banter. There was a lot of really good things going on. And I honestly thought that it was being done really well. The thing is that once I got, I think like around 40% into this story, the sex started kicking in, like all of their tension, everything, it started to like finally combust and they started getting it on. And the thing is that I'm more of a slow burn romance sort of reader. And I really like when that is dragged out a little bit more, like when you really make me wait for it. And the thing is that this book started giving in a little bit early for me. And that is why the rest of the book, I started to get a little bit bored. Like it was still a really fun time. Like I thought that all the sex scenes were done really well. I was very into it and everything like that. And I was entertained enough throughout the rest of the story. Like I don't think it was that boring. I just started getting bored a little bit. So my entertainment level of it started going down. So we started off with 5 stars, and then like the middle of the book started to feel a little bit more like 4 stars. And then once we got to the 80% mark and the third act conflict finally came in, that is when my rating went down and I had to pull it down to a 3.75 stars. So the thing is that I did not like what went on there. It is one of my top tropes that I absolutely hate. And I really do think that it didn't need to be there, and it did ruin the story for me. So I'm not going to say here what it is because I don't want to spoil it for you guys, but if you were interested, I did write about it in my Goodreads review. It's like very clearly written out there with a spoiler warning, but I did write it there in case anybody was interested. So I'm going to leave it at that. But basically, I didn't like the ending of the book. I think that the whole way that all of that ended up playing out was very rushed, and I was very upset that it ends up being put in there, especially because like it's a trope that a lot of people hate. And also like third act conflicts are always things that are touchy for everybody. So I thought that it was really like for so many reasons, it didn't work for me. And basically that is why I ended up giving it a 3.75 stars total, even though I do think that overall it was a pretty solid read. And I definitely would recommend giving it a shot. Like I think that it had a lot of really good things going for it. And I do think that a lot of people would very, very much enjoy this book. But I was just so upset by the time that I got to the end of it that I was honestly ready to DNF it the second that trope showed up. Like I was already getting very antsy for the book to be over because, the couple had gone together so early on in the book, and I was just like, okay, I'm like getting bored here, and then this came in and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, this is what I was waiting for. Like I wanted to I was hoping for the book to just like keep going up, and then all of a sudden we got this like little conflict and I'm like, oh, why did you have to do this to the book? This could have been almost a 5-star read for a lot of people. Like a lot of people like could have easily given this book a 5 stars if only that one thing wasn't added in, and therefore I was very upset about it. But I still do think that this book is definitely worth a read, and I do think that she did a good job with what she wrote. Like she chose certain tropes, she chose certain things to do it, and I think that it was laid out very well and it was done very well. So overall, I had a pretty solid experience with this book. Didn't love it, not a 5-star read, but it was almost there up until the end. So basically, yeah, if you were interested in reading this book, if you like single dads, if you like nanny romances, if you like age gaps, if you like Grumpy Sunshines, if you like small town romances, this is pretty much like, all of that wrapped into one, and it's done pretty well. So, maybe give it a shot, but also check my Goodreads review and check that last, spoiler warning that I had made, because I do think that is something that you might want to know before you actually go into it. So that was all of the books that I ended up reading with my free month of Kindle Unlimited. And before I let you go, I did want to quickly talk for a few minutes about how my Kindle Unlimited / ebook experience actually went, because I know that this is something I have chatted about a lot on my channel, about how I never really read ebooks. I don't really have any interest in getting into ebooks and everything along those lines. And people have always been very interested in like that idea. Like I've always gotten questions about that. So now I wanted to share with you how that experience went for me of actually giving ebooks a shot for the first time. So if you're interested in hearing that, then let's get into the second part of this video. So first up, I will say that it is something that did take me a little bit of time to get used to. Like the changing of mediums, like going from physical books to going to ebooks did take me a couple of books to get used to it. Like right in the beginning, I was not very into it. Like I really didn't like the idea of like not knowing where in the book I was actually at, and like not really like flipping the pages. Just the physical experience of like changing over from physical books to ebooks, it did take me a little bit of time to get used to, but I did get used to it after a while there. So I will say that, it's just something that like takes a little bit of time, but once I got into it, I started getting very used to to it, and then it started to not bother me. Like I started getting used to the idea of just like quickly clicking and seeing like at what part of the book I'm at. And I kind of liked the little thing in the corner of like telling me like, oh, this is how many minutes I have left of the chapter, and this is like, what percent of the book I'm at. Like I started getting used to the experience of reading an ebook versus a physical book. So that all those feelings that it's like I had towards a physical book ended up changing over into ebook, but it just took me a while to get used to it. So I will say that like, I am a little bit scared to go back to physical books now because I got so used to reading ebooks, and I'm not really down for that transition. And I could stay with ebooks, but I'm choosing not to. Like I want to go back to physical books. Like I chose it as an experiment, and it's something that I do think that I will like, choose to do again in the future. Like if for some reason I want to read something and I can only get it via ebook, or for some reason I'm like down to choose like to do another month of Kindle Unlimited, like I'm just in the mood, I definitely will do it. Like I'm not like against ebooks anymore, but I do want to go back to reading physical books because I do enjoy them a little bit more. So I did come up with a lot of pros and cons for why I feel this way. So let's go through those. So first of all, we'll go through the pros first. And the first thing that is obviously amazing about ebooks is that it's cheaper. Like if you have Kindle Unlimited, first of all, I got my month for free, so I don't even know how much Kindle Unlimited is per month, but no doubt about it that it is cheaper, especially if you're reading as many books as I'm reading. Like I don't even remember how much I just shared with you. What did I share with you? Like at least 15 books. I read those over the course of 2 weeks. I started like this whole Kindle Unlimited thing basically at the beginning of October. I had my month free, but it kind of took me 2 months to realize that I should probably give ebooks a little bit of a shot while I have the opportunity. So I kind of actually only spent 2 weeks reading all of the books that I shared with you at the beginning of this video, and I definitely saved myself a lot of money. So I really do like that aspect of it, of how it could definitely be a much cheaper option for reading, especially if you can't afford to buy every single book that you want to physically read. So, that is that. And then on top of that, I also really enjoyed the fact that I was able to read a lot of books that I wouldn't have necessarily purchased for myself. Like I even said, as I was talking about all of the books in this video today, about how, like Marriage for One, I kind of was always considering reading it, but I just never really had the urge to purchase it. And then like the Bonsat Thai series, like all those books are super expensive, and like I wasn't really like down to actually spend the money on them, but because they were available like on Kindle Unlimited, that I was ready to give them a shot. So I really do think that I really liked the idea that like there were so many books readily available to me that I wasn't like, dying to read, but I was willing to read because they were just like readily available on my phone, if that makes sense. So I really liked that aspect of it. And then on top of that, I do think that Kindle Unlimited has a really good selection of books. The thing is that I have read a lot of books, and a lot of the books that I've read are Kindle Unlimited books. Like I didn't even realize that all of the books that I read are all of the books that are always available on Kindle Unlimited. But like as I was scrolling through like, all of the books that I could add and everything like that, like, borrow from Kindle Unlimited and everything like that, I basically realized that like, I have read the majority of what's available. They're not the majority. Obviously, there are a ton of books out there, but of the books that I'm somewhat interested in reading, I have read the majority of what was actually available. So it wasn't like the easiest thing to go and find books that I want to read. Like I really had to like look and be like, okay, well, I wouldn't purchase this book for myself, but like because it's free, let me give it a shot and see if like, I will enjoy it or not. So that is kind of like, how that went for me. Like there were books that I was willing to read that I wasn't necessarily willing to buy, and I really liked it for that. And that is something that I feel like I would use in the future. Like if in a couple of months from now, I decided that I want to do another month of Kindle Unlimited, I feel like there's going to be a collection of books that I'm willing to spend my time on, but I wasn't necessarily willing to spend my money on, if that makes sense. So I feel like that is kind of a pro. I don't know if you understood my like whole like, explanation there, but basically that was a pro in my eyes. And then on top of that, I absolutely loved the easy access that it had. So I didn't actually buy an actual Kindle. Like I just downloaded the Kindle app on my phone, and I spent the entire month doing that. And I know that a lot of people specifically like getting Kindle specifically so that they're not actually on their phone. And I mean, I haven't looked so much into Kindles and why people really like them, but I know that that is one very big thing of like people like their Kindle so that they could put their phone away and they could just like sit on their Kindle and enjoy it for what it is. I personally like don't really care to like, have TikTok on the same like app that I'm like reading on. Like if I wanted to take a break, it was so easy to just like, scroll out and then go to TikTok, spend a couple minutes on it and go back. Like I didn't really care to like, have the feeling of like needing a separate like device, if that makes sense. So I really enjoyed the experience of using Kindle on my phone, and I have like zero negative things to say about that. I really liked the app. I thought that it worked very well. I really liked all of the like elements that it had in it, and I really liked that it was always with me. So like usually when I'm doing other things other than reading, reading, I will listen to an audiobook because, you know, if I'm cooking dinner or if I'm taking my dog for a walk or if I'm just doing other things, I usually just like start my audiobook, and then when I have time, I'll go back to my physical book. But because I did have my phone with me at all times, I actually ended up reading a lot more. Like usually what I would do is like I would go and I would cook some dinner and I would listen to an audiobook or watch a booktube like video or something like that while I was cooking. And then while I was actually like, you know, sitting waiting for things to happen, once I was done like physically using my hands, I would just like scroll through a bunch of TikToks to waste time because, you know, my book was upstairs or something like that. But because I had my book on my phone, I actually ended up like getting to read a lot more while I was doing other things. Like when I was taking my dog for a walk, instead of like spending my time listening to an audiobook or just like randomly scrolling through TikTok, I ended up reading books, and I ended up getting through a lot more books because of that. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. So I feel like, you know, that was a very big pro that I did enjoy about it. Like just always having all my books on my phone, that was pretty clutch. But then besides for that, another thing that I did kind of enjoy about the idea of ebooks was the way that I was able to annotate and highlight and just in general, like take screenshots of some things, which is something that I never really do. Like I've talked about it before on my channel, how I'm not big into annotating. I don't really like the idea of annotating, but I will say that I think that the features of how to annotate your books on like via ebook and everything like that is pretty clutch. And I do see how it's kind of fun to do that. And I didn't really like, you know, use these features like a ton. Like I really only like highlighted like a couple of things here and there, like maybe like one or two quotes like in each book that I read, because like, you know, I was kind of just like trying to get used to the idea, and I didn't really like, it didn't really catch on to me. And that's why I know that like I'm not necessarily going to be somebody who's one day very much going to get into annotating, but I do see how annotating can be very fun and also be very easy when you are reading ebooks. So I do see why a lot of people really like to do that. And I do think that ebooks in general have a very like, you know, easy way for like, you know, that to happen and everything like that. So that was another positive thing that I did notice about ebooks. And then on top of that, I have one more thing that is a pro, but also is a con. And that is that I was able to read faster. So I know that everybody says this about like ebooks in general, but somehow you do end up reading them a lot faster. And I can't exactly explain why that is. I think I just like flew through sentences quicker somehow. And I mean, that is technically a very good thing, but that's not necessarily something that I'm looking to do. Like I read enough books per year and I'm not necessarily looking to read faster. And I do think that reading via ebook kind of like made me read faster without me necessarily even wanting to. And that kind of is how I want to pull us into all of the cons that I actually had for ebooks, which is that I actually like, I felt like I was skimming a lot. And like, obviously like you can stop yourself from skimming, but I feel like I was reading faster. And then at some points it was so much easier to skim for some reason in ebooks for a lot of reasons. Obviously because like I wasn't actually paying for the book. So if I wasn't enjoying it, obviously I don't mind just like skimming through it because like, you know, I'm not wasting anything here. Like it's only my time. And if I wanted to know something, I would just like try to get to the point of what I want to know as quickly as possible. So I did find myself skimming some of the books that I wasn't enjoying as much. And then on top of that, I just feel like naturally, like for some odd reason, like the way that I was reading ebooks, I just ended up reading them faster in a skimming sort of sense. And I didn't really enjoy that. And obviously that's something that's just on me. Like I can obviously like, you know, control that, but it is something that I felt was happening very easily because it was an ebook. So yeah, I was reading faster, but that was also making me skim a little bit more. And I wasn't really enjoying that aspect of it. And I know that that doesn't like, I don't know if that really makes sense, but for the people who do read ebooks and do say how like you can read faster, maybe you would understand me a little bit of where I'm coming from. But either way, that is something that I noticed I did do a lot more often. And that's not something that I necessarily enjoyed. Like I'm not looking necessarily to read faster. I read enough and I want to just like enjoy my experience for what it was. But just the way that ebooks felt, for some reason, I was just like flying through it quicker than I necessarily wanted to. And I know that that's something on me, like everybody wants to read faster, everybody wants to read more, but I'm not someone like that. Like I just want to like sit and enjoy a book. And for some reason, just the way that ebooks felt made me not enjoy the experience as much. And that actually kind of like goes into another con that I had, which was that it was very much of like a different experience for me. Like obviously, like I'm very into reading physical books. I really like the experience of reading a physical book. And yeah, I did get used to the idea of reading via ebook, but it still was a specific experience that I don't know if I necessarily loved. Like I feel like I didn't connect to any of the books as much because I wasn't physically holding it in my hand. Like I feel like every single book that I read literally like looked and felt the same exact way, because all it was like pressing next, pressing next, pressing next. All of the like, you know, the pages looked the same and everything like that. And I just feel like overall, like I just wasn't as attached or invested in any of the books that I read, even if they were very good. Like for some reason, I do think that I'm a person that physically needs to hold the book just to like have that extra layer of like connectedness to the book, if that makes sense. And I don't know if it really does to anybody other than me, but either way, that is just something that I really felt about the like, overall experience of reading ebooks. And I do think that that was a very big con for me. Like it felt different, and I didn't like the differentness of how it felt, even if I did get used to it. So overall, that is more or less my experience with ebooks. I feel like I kind of more or less touched upon everything that I felt over the past couple of weeks of when I was, going through this. So I will say that I understand why people read ebooks for a lot of reasons. I do see the appeal to it. I do see why people prefer ebooks versus for people who prefer physical books. I think I'm going to stick on the people that prefer physical books, but I can see myself reading ebooks here and there in the future. So overall, I am very happy that I ended up doing this for myself. I am very happy that I now kind of opened myself up to another format of reading, and I do think that I will, utilize that in the future. But for now, I'm going to, go back to physical books for a while, and we'll see what happens next. So either way, that is all I basically wanted to share with you for today's video. So I do hope that you enjoyed it. I know that it was a little bit long, but if you did make it to the end, then just know that I really do appreciate you sitting here and listening to me while I rant about all of this stuff. So if you did enjoy watching this video, then please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you are not currently subscribed. And again, thank you so much for spending the time with me while I chatted about my Kindle Unlimited experience. And either way, until next time, enjoy reading.